Hey, good evening. Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for joining me. This is No Judgment Here with Tish Ross, and I am your host. Tonight, we're talking about domestic abuse, domestic violence, and unfortunately, how it can end in death. I have two very special guests. They've joined me on my radio show, and they are back to share their story here with you, with us, and with others to educate, to bring awareness, to break the stigma and the shame that comes from, I guess, what domestic violence and domestic abuse can sometimes bring to a man and a woman. And then to also help you to learn maybe what steps you can take to possibly escape or heal from your journey if you have gone through this or if you know someone who is going through this. So again, this is a very sensitive subject. It is not for little's ears. So if you have little ones, maybe they can go and maybe into another room, or maybe you could watch later. But I do appreciate you guys for joining, and I would really, really appreciate if you could share this. You never know who needs to hear this, and that's how we get the word out. So I'm going to bring my guests in so that they can share their stories with us. We have Faith here. Thank you, Faith, for coming in and joining us.
Inviting me always.
Of course. And also I have Chris. He is here and he is going to share his story as well. Gosh, thank you guys for coming back and joining me. It's been a few years since you guys had first joined me on the radio show. And I feel like, unfortunately, domestic violence, domestic abuse is not ending. And as much as we hope and pray that it would, you hear of people, women and men, going through it on the daily and losing their lives or staying in relationships that they are afraid to escape. They don't know what to do. They don't know where to go. They don't know who to tell. And unfortunately, some of not knowing who to tell, the reason behind that is because it comes with shame. And we are here to break that stigma for men and women. And I appreciate having both you guys come on to help me do that. We're going to kind of start with you introducing yourself and talking about your journey in domestic abuse, domestic violence, and what you went through, maybe some of the remnants of it, or what you still struggle with, if you do, maybe you don't. And then how you got through once you escaped, or once you left a situation, or once you were able to tell somebody, and then how you are healing and where you are now. So Faith, I'm going to let you start, kind of introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your story.
My name is Faith Stevenson. I actually just got married a couple weeks ago, so it's still really weird to say that name. Faith Conaway is what everybody else knows me by. Been that for 25 years. And I have 3 daughters. One is college age, and she is in the Air Force stationed in Italy. And then I have a senior in high school, and I have a sophomore in high school, and they're all really busy and really active. So we stay really busy. I have 2 jobs and a side business, so we just stay really busy. And I live in Texas now. When I was going through my abusive marriage, we lived in Florida. We lived in a really chaotic home. There was a lot of stress, a lot of trauma, a lot of chaos. It was like walking on eggshells all the time. You didn't know what was gonna make something explode. It could be a happy day, it could be a bad day, and you could do the same thing both days and end up with different results. So that was very stressful.
How did you meet your abuser?
Met him at Bible college. We dated for 3.5 years, but the college was so strict. It was like a bubble. And
Mm.
so when you were in the bubble, everybody acted a certain way and everybody was in compliance. But when you got away from there, or away from people's eyes, away from out in public, or, away from those systems, then things were different. You can think that know people. And when I left him, we had been together 11 years. And it's not that people didn't believe me, but they didn't know. They had no idea that this person that is like extremely outgoing, extremely charismatic, always appeared super happy. I mean, he had a temper and they knew that a little bit, but from the outside looking in, we were a happy family. Never, if they had to pick out of 100 people who it would be, they would never believe it was him. I mean, I always encourage people, just listen, and you don't have to listen to just one side of the story, but listen and believe people when they tell you, until you have a reason not to believe them. Because you think people, you really don't know what it's like to live in that home.
Exactly. And so when you guys met in college, you obviously you dated, and were there any, in hindsight, or maybe even in the moment, were there any red flags, Faith, whenever you started dating and getting in this relationship with him?
Yeah, there were. Part of it was, in his past, he had a troubled youth. His dad was like a happy drunk. And so he wasn't violent, but his parents were always yelling at each other. And so, there was that. That's how he learned to deal with every conflict. Everything was yelling. You always had to yell. And then he had a hair trigger anger. So like he'd get angry, but he didn't really direct it at me. So I wasn't really like scared of him. I wasn't scared of him or anything when I married him. But, he had problem with authority figures, and he would cause a problem if he didn't think something was right. And he had a past with law enforcement, but it was while he was a teenager, and it was before he met Christ. And so this was, I didn't dismiss it all, but I was like, no, he's a new person now. He's not, I'm not going to hold him to that. He was 14 or whatever he was when that happened. People grow, people do grow and learn get new tools for how to deal with, stress and conflict and all that. So looking back, yes, there were absolutely signs. But I just didn't, I just never dreamed he would ever do anything like that, or that my life, day-to-day life would be like that.
Chris, I'm coming to you for a little bit, and then we'll continue to get deeper with both of you, but just kind of an introduction. Tell us who you are, and then maybe some of the beginnings of the domestic violence or abuse that you endured.
My name is Chris Keith. I'm currently in the DFW area, Dallas, Fort Worth. Married, been married 25 years, almost 26.
Wow.
I got married at 19, so it was just something I was ready for, and I met the right person. And we have 5 kids, and the age range is crazy. We have 1 in college, and then we have 2 little ones in kindergarten. So the house is pretty hectic, and so. But I like that chaos. It's good chaos. My story kind of starts when I was little. So I grew up in Tulsa, Oklahoma. At the time, it was me, my brother Mikey, who's 3 years older than me, and then my parents who married young, and so they were. I don't know. I saw it as a normal relationship, right? But there's a lot of yelling, a lot of fighting. I said I was 5 at this time. My brother was 8. That's kind of when the rest happens. But there was a lot of yelling, a lot of anger, a lot of hatred from my dad towards my mom. It wasn't really, sometimes it would be towards us, but for the most part, it was towards my mom. So it was just witnessing that. And then being 5 years old, I really didn't know how to process all of that. And it's really the only relationship that I ever saw. So it's kind of just how I thought things were. My parents back and forth. A lot of the times my mom, my dad would get physical with my mom, and she would end up leaving him. There were several times that she took me and my brother. We'd go to a battered women's shelter, I think for a few days while things calmed down. But as a lot of women do in cases of domestic violence, she kept taking him back. I don't know if she really thought he would change, or it's just something she was telling herself to keep the family together. She even told my aunt, I think like a week before this happened, he would never hurt the kids, so we're going to give it another try. And so they had got separated a few times. So at the night of this incident, my parents were actually separated. So my dad wasn't living at the house. This was a Sunday evening, he had called and asked my mom, "Hey, can I come over and let's just talk things out and go from there?" And she said sure. So when my dad arrived, he was under the influence of something. He was an alcoholic, but him and his buddies also would dabbled in some drugs and things like that. But it was mostly alcohol, from what I knew, from what other family members have told me. And so when he came over, it's like they immediately started arguing. But it was kind of normal in our household, or to me. My brother and I we were playing in the other room. We'd hear yelling, and we didn't even rush in to see what was going on because we'd heard it all the time. We'd always gone to sleep hearing yelling and things like that. So that night they were fighting, and I know it was time for me and my brother to go to bed. And we didn't share a bedroom, but from what I can remember, we always would end up sleeping in the other one's room. I'd either make a pallet in my brother's room and sleep, or he would do the same in mine. And so that's what we did that night. And so we were sleeping in the same room. My parents kept arguing in the living room, and I don't know for how long, but then eventually the fight and the yelling led to the bedroom, where it got physical. I don't know. Again, my brother and I had fallen asleep, so I don't know exactly what was said. I assume it was, my mom saying no, or that, something that made my dad just filled him with so much rage that he put his hands around her neck and started to choke her. And she eventually collapsed at the foot of the bed. And then he grabbed a pillow, and then he suffocated her. And then he went to the closet and grabbed his .38. And he came into the room where we were sleeping, and he stuck the gun to the back of my brother's head, and he pulled the trigger. Then he turned to where I was sleeping, stuck the gun to the back of my head, right here behind my ear, and pulled the trigger. Then he went into the living room, sat in his chair, and took his own life. That was a Sunday evening. So on Monday, my mom didn't show up for work. And so it's kind of a long story, but everyone in my family kind of worked at this one insurance company. So my aunt, a couple other relatives, they all worked there, and everybody kind of knew the tense situation going on with my parents. And so when my mom didn't show up for work, my aunt was immediately worried. And so she told her boss, "Hey, I got to go check on my sister." She left. She actually called the police and asked them to come with her. And they basically told her no, but call us if you get there and something happened, or they wouldn't go without knowing what happened. And so my aunt went over there by herself, knocked on the door, no answer, obviously. And so she ran around to the back and looked in. We had like a sliding glass door, and the curtains were open. So she looked in and she could see my dad in there. And so she, flipped out. She went next door, used the phone, called the police. Again, this was back, this is in 1985. So no one had a cell phone. So she had to run next door, just freaking out, and then call the police. And then so everybody came, paramedics, news crews started showing up. It was just another statistic, right? So we were all pronounced dead. One officer reported that rigor mortis already started setting in on my body. And again, they estimate about 12 to 18 hours that it happened until they found us. So we were all pronounced dead. Everyone started leaving. We have the footage up on YouTube, the news footage. It's surreal to see because it shows one of the last paramedics open the door and say, "Hey, we have one alive in here." Because as he was leaving, he saw a little bit of movement in my arm. And so then he was just like, wow. And so it immediately turned from a tragic scene of just everybody dying to, hold on, we got to save this little boy's life. So as the only survivor, and on the footage, you can just see they didn't like gently set me in a gurney, or it just shows the footage online. It just shows the lady. She threw me over her shoulder. Again, I've got a head wound, right? She threw me over her shoulders and just starts running down the driveway into the cul-de-sac where the helicopter flew in. And so they flew me to St. Francis Hospital in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And the surgeon met my grandpa there, and I'll try to, I know it's kind of a lot of detail. And
no, you're fine. You're fine.
This is when I first kind of started seeing, not then, but now as I look back at it, I can see all the little details that kind of God orchestrated to help me survive. Just the fact that when my grandpa heard about what happened on his way to the hospital, because he wasn't my legal blood relative. They were just grandparents through like marriage. Anyway, he actually had the wherewithal to call a lawyer at church and said, hey, what do I have to do to get power of attorney or whatever? Anyway, he was able to, once he got to the hospital, he was able to authorize the surgery because they couldn't find my real grandma. They didn't know where she was. Just little things like that. And so it's amazing to think how God kind of orchestrated a lot of things in my life. So anyway, the surgery was probably about 6 to 8 hours. I think the surgeon, my grandpa said that he talked to the surgeon, and the surgeon told him, we got to do the surgery. If we don't, he's going to die. But if we do the surgery, though, there's also a pretty big chance a tool could go the wrong direction on a spinal cord and he would die. But we have to try. And my grandpa said, go ahead. He said they said a prayer together, and then the surgeon went in and they did the surgery. And I still remember waking up in the hospital. It's probably one of the scariest moments of my life. Because again, I had just went to sleep. I'm 5 years old. I just went to sleep on a Sunday night, and now I'm waking up in the hospital. Right. So I can still remember staring. The doorway was kind of like at an angle to the right. People from the neighborhood, people that knew my grandparents were dropping by to bring things, just to see how it was going. And I was just staring at that doorway because I was looking, again, I don't know what's going on. So my head's all bandaged up, and I'm just waiting for my mom or brother to walk through that door and kind of tell me what's going on. Right. And so I just stared, and it never happened. And that's when I kind of started realizing, hey, something's not right. And then my grandparents are sitting to the right of me. But they were too scared to like give me information. And so we all just kind of sat there and didn't talk. And I also was sort of in a vegetative state. I couldn't move at all, and I couldn't talk. And so I couldn't ask questions. And so I just laid there miserably for a long time, until eventually my grandparents got custody of me and took me home with them. And then that started the next journey of dealing with everything, coping with everything. And then another hardship that would come later, which is the fact that they didn't tell me what happened. So when they got guardianship of me, the state told them, hey, don't tell this boy he's 5 years old, right? Don't tell him exactly what happened, because he can't handle it mentally. And so for the longest time, I was led to believe that I was in a car accident, and I'm the only one that survived. And I was so shy that I just never even asked questions. My grandparents were scared to reveal too much information. So really, until I was about 12 years old, there was just no communication about that.
What do you feel? How do you feel about the fact that your grandparents didn't tell you for so long? Do you blame them? Were you angry with them? What was that like when you found out?
I was. I remember at 12 was when they took me to the counselor from our church, and they laid down all the articles and started talking to me about, kids are smart. I started figuring things out kind of along the way as the years went by. But at 12 is when they sat me down and kind of told me everything. And I was at first. I was mad. It was just a whole range of emotions kind of coming back. I was mad at my grandparents for not telling me about my life sooner, obviously hating my dad, mad at my mom for taking him back so many times. And also as kids, you always find a way to blame yourself for anything that's happened in life. Kids always find a way to blame themselves, even though it wasn't justified. But so I was mad at my grandparents for a while. And then as I got older, a little more mature, I started realizing that they did the best they could. They were the ones that stepped up, gave me a home, raised me in a Christian home, which was the biggest blessing. And so, but it took me a while to realize that. I was mad at them at first.
Mm-hmm. Of course. And and the reason I ask that is because there are probably people that are going to be watching who have those same feelings, and then they're normal feelings. There's no shame in it. And that's why that's why I like the details. It's not to be nosy, but I like the details because the transparency, the vulnerability is what people need to hear, because it's things that people don't say and they keep to themselves that other people need to hear. Like, people need to hear that, yeah, I was mad. I was mad at my mom for taking my dad back. I was mad at my dad. I was mad at my grandparents, but they made the best decision with what they knew. And yes, what a huge blessing for them to take you into your home. So it's okay. We're normal. It's okay to be normal and to have these feelings and these emotions that we have to work through in order to become the best adults that we can, or best husband or best wife or best mother or best father that we can. We have to work through and express those feelings. And so it's a big, huge part of trying to break the shame and the stigma of let's talk about it. Let's get help. Let's let other people know that they're not alone in not only the situation, but in their feelings. And so I'm going to move to you, Faith. Tell us a little bit about the abuse, the kind of abuse that you were in, and sort of when it got to its worst, to the peak.
Yeah. So I remember within the first, probably 6 months, he slapped me one day across the face. And I grew up in an abusive home. I was not going to be doing that. I said never. That would never, never, never happen to me. Never. And I looked right at him and I said, I'm not doing this. I am not your punching bag. If you ever lay a hand on me again, I will leave. You will never see me again. And I really feel like he believed me because he did not lay a hand on me for probably 10 years. But we lived in such just fits of rage, almost like OCD, like everything had to be perfect. The kid, once I had kids, the kids making noise, normal noises like crying, it just stressed him out. And messes stressed him out. I remember one day, and my oldest still remembers this. He came home one day and she had cleaned up the playroom and it wasn't perfect. And he took and we had a whole playroom and then she had a bedroom. He took everything in the playroom and we had bins and racks and he took bookcases. He took absolutely everything in there and dumped it all into a pile in the middle of the room. And, mommy dearest style stood there while she put every single thing up. She was probably 5, just eggshells. I don't know how else to describe it. And so we lived in a very stressful home, but he didn't lay a hand on us for probably 10 years. And then I don't really know what happened. I have my theories. His birth father died the year that I left. His birth father had died earlier in that year. And we traveled to the funeral. I think it brought up a bunch of unresolved things. He was raised by his stepdad. Awesome guy. I still have a relationship with him and his mom to this day. Love the entire family to death. I get along with everybody but him. In fact, she's coming to stay with me next month. She's real involved with the kids. She'll be at graduation. They come to everything. But I think that a lot of that was unresolved stuff with him. And he just portrayed it in rage. And anyway, after that, something happened. Something clicked in him and he started being abusive. He started punching me. He started hurting the kids. He would just be rough with them, or he'd slap them, or stuff he had never done before. And I had a couple conversations with him because he'd be like in that, I don't know if he's bipolar. It was almost like he was in that mode or he was in his normal mode. When he was in normal mode, you could talk to him and kind of try to reason with him. When he's in this other mode, there was no reason. Reason was out the door. It was just every man for himself. And so I had given him a few, very stern conversations. I'm like, I don't know what's happened. I don't know what's going on with you. I don't know if you need help. His mom had told him to get help. He stopped speaking to her for a long period of time because he didn't ever want help. He didn't want to admit anything was wrong with him, So it just escalated from there. And I remember one day I found one person to talk to. It's kind of a long story, but it's kind of a weird situation. We worked at a Christian college. Like I said, we went on staff there. He was on their faculty. He was their college volleyball assistant coach. He traveled with the team. That was almost like a compound. I don't know how else to describe it. They had their own, like, that's where you went to church. That's where you worked. That's who was your daycare. That's where you did everything. You played sports with them. Everything, your whole life was just this one group of people. And so I didn't know if I went and told somebody if it would cost him his job, cost me my job. I mean, there's so many factors. People say all the time, why don't you just leave? You didn't have to stay. It's so complex. It's extremely complex between wanting, like Chris said, wanting to keep the family together, between fear, all these unknown fears. Like you don't know what your legal recourse is. You don't know how you're going to make it financially. And they make sure and let you know you cannot do it without them. They're sure to keep you, you're worthless. You can't possibly you're way too stupid to figure out how to do it by yourself. I found one person to talk to, and they told me, they're like, I would describe some of the things that were going on. They were like, what is it going to take for you to leave? And I said, somebody's going to have to get seriously hurt. And they were like, listen to yourself. You want to wait till somebody gets hurt to do something, and I was raised in a Christian home, and I believed that marriage was till death do you part. I didn't think I had the right to leave. I didn't think I think I had to do everything I could to stay. And that is what compelled me to stay for the most part. There was a lot of stigma. There was a lot of judgment and all that stuff too. But for the most part, I felt it was my duty to stay, to keep our family together, to blah, blah, all this stuff. And they're like, this person told me, they're like, you listen to yourself. You sound crazy. You're waiting for somebody to get hurt. Your kids have one childhood, that you get one shot. Now, instead of having two rational adults to raise them, they only have one. And the one adult that's left is saying, I'm waiting for somebody to get hurt. And you're telling me they're getting hurt, and then something clicked in me that day. And I mean, if you'd have told me I was ever going to ever get divorced in my life, I would have told you were a liar. I just never, ever fathomed that for me. But I think it was just God. They said the right words to me at the right time, and something just clicked. And I was like, I have to get out of here. I have to get a plan at least. So I did 2 weeks from that day. I took 2 weeks and prayed. I fasted. I got a plan together. And then the day that I left, it was a Friday night. It was cold. It was rainy. He left on a volleyball trip with the college team. So they were out of town. And I had planted a letter in his bag. He left on Thursday. So I know he had gotten the letter because it was in the top of his bag. And it said, you have two choices. Because I was raised in an abusive home, and my mom left my dad. And in a even more steeped in stigma time than now. We're talking 20 years later. Back then, you really didn't divorce your husband. You really, children were to be seen and not heard, and all of those things. And, so my mom had left him, but he happened to die in an accident while they were separated. But during that separation time, he had gone to counseling because that was my mom's stipulation. You have to go to counseling, and the church is like, no, you need to go to counseling if this is actually what's happening. Well, it was a church counselor. It was one of his buddies. And when he would still get us, there was always another adult in the visitation. But when he would still get us, he was still the same way in private. I knew in my heart, and then I honestly think God took him during that time. But because of that, when it came time to write my letter to my ex-husband, I said, you have two choices. You can go to your administration, which is the same person that you go to church with, the same people that are your bosses, the same people, like these administration of this college. You can go to them and they will get you help. Or you can go to a secular, that's going to cost you your reputation. Or you can go to a secular place in town. Nobody has to know. Go there. It's going to cost you money, but you go there and get help. And then we'll revisit it down the road. I gave him those two choices. He didn't even call me. He didn't respond. He did nothing and I told myself, if I haven't heard back from him by Friday at midnight, I'm leaving. And I did. I packed the car. I took the girls. I took what I needed to, and I just drove and I left. And we never went back. He never saw them again a day after that.
Wow. Were you scared, Faith? Were you scared? I mean, so I think back, and you had mentioned that it was like walking on eggshells all the time with him, and not knowing how he was going to react to things. And to me, that because I grew up with a father who was a raging alcoholic, who we were both verbally and physically abused, but the mental abuse is what stayed with me. I can remember the beatings, but it's the mental abuse that I, as an adult, have had to unlearn certain ways that I think about myself or behaviors.
Yeah, I agree. It's way more traumatic. I think I told people in the past, I'd rather be physically abused than mentally and emotionally abused, because I don't know if it's just my personality or what, but I like absorb it, and I can't get past it. You know, you heal from physical, but you're like, how do you heal from this when somebody just for years speaks over you how terrible you are, what a terrible person you are, how you can't do anything by yourself, you're so stupid, you can't do anything right, and you certainly can't raise kids, you can't do your job, you can't, you know, nothing is ever good enough. Which is funny because my mom described my dad the same way, and I didn't get that from him. But I did get the walking on eggshells part. Yeah, it was terrifying. I mean, it was terrifying. I was shaking when I left, but it was also freeing. Like it was such a relief. And I mean, I had a place I was going. Thought I had a job lined up, a school for the girls to go to, but it almost didn't matter. It was like, I knew that this was my clean break. I was not going back. I was not going to be talked into. I turned my phone off. I scared the bejeebers out of my family because I didn't tell a soul, because I knew what was going to happen. He was going to track down everybody that he knew that I knew that he thought I was going to. And he did. I mean, he harassed my family. He harassed my best friend in Louisiana. He called everybody he could think of. He called my brother. He called my sister. I mean, he tried to find, and I had an auto email sent for Monday morning to my boss to tell her I was done and I wasn't going to be into work and that we left. And that was probably the first time anybody in that town and community even knew that I was safe. Like my sisters thought I was not safe because I didn't tell anybody, but I wanted, and they thanked me later. One of our best friends there, she's like, thank you for not telling me, because when he beat down my door, I could tell him, I have no idea. You know, I don't know. Go to the police, you know? And so I think if I had it to do over, I would do it the same way. The clean break helps. Like I don't think me personally, I could have been, you know, going through my phone, reading texts from him and him crying and voicemails and all that, emails, you know, and all that, and still stood my ground, you know, and I know I did the right thing. I know I did the right thing, but I'm sure that was really hard for him. And I mean, you leave your abuser, but you still love him. You married him because you love him. And that part was hard, you know, thinking about that. I just kept thinking about the future I was trying to build for my girls, and the new clean slate for them, where they could build a life where they didn't have to live like that.
Yes.
So, you know, I just stood my ground and didn't answer my phone.
So Chris, let me ask you this. Faith just said, you know, you have to leave your abuser, but you still love them. Tell me about your feelings for your parents.
It's definitely changed over the years. I think the initial being upset at my mom was very short-lived, because she was my mom. She's the one that loved us and did her best with us. So I think most of my anger and hatred was rightfully so, you know, towards my dad. And not until I got older, maybe, I know 17, 18, 19, where I started realizing, oh, you know, I have to at some point deal with this or forgive my dad or just somehow move on, because reserving part of my heart to hate my dad was not getting me anywhere in life. And it was letting him affect me. And it took me a while to realize that. And so I talked to, you know, my youth minister, a couple other buddies, and just got counseling on what am I supposed to do? Is this something I can do overnight? If I just say, boom, I forgive my dad, or is this but I was told, you know, it's a process. And I've learned I wasn't really able to start healing until I prayed to God and was able to eventually forgive my dad. And then it is a process, and I'm sure Faith will agree that it's not something you just, it's always with you. There's moments in life that kind of drudge up memories or feelings, as far as like, you know, my mom will never get to go, you know, seeing my kids get married. She'll never get to go do this, and so they'll never have my brother around. And so the feelings always kind of come back, and then you kind of have to deal with those. I hated my dad for a long time, but then I ended up forgiving him to move on. How
did losing your parents at such a young age affect you in those years, your elementary, middle school, maybe more so middle school, high school years? I mean, not having a mom or a dad. You know, I just had an episode of again, us talking about growing up without our parents and how that affects you. What effects did it have on you? Number one, being raised in that's all you saw. Did you take on any of those tendencies as a man? And what kind of effects did it have on you as a child?
There's a lot of different ways my mind goes with this. Well, first of all, I told friends as I got older, it's like I don't really know any different. I don't know what it's like to have a mom past 5 years old or a loving family. So part of it was like I don't know what I'm missing. I know I had thank the Lord, I had two great Christian grandparents that raised me. I got to see what a real relationship was. How my grandpa would handle fights. I can remember seeing him and my grandma get into an argument, and he'd leave the room, and then even if it was not his fault, he'd walk in the room a few minutes later and apologize. And I was like, what is going on? I've never seen this in my life. They weren't perfect, but they did show me what it's like to have a good, healthy relationship. And so,
is that your mom's parents?
It's her. It was like my mom's half mom. They raised my mom,
okay.
But they weren't blood either.
Not
they were married to my grandpa. It's a crazy family tree. My wife can explain it real easy. I still have a hard time.
I believe you.
Yeah. So it's like kind of like I just think of it as like half grandma, and then when she got remarried, they raised me.
I see. Good.
So but it's trying to think of the other question, but it's.
So how did you take on any of those learned behaviors? I mean, we watch and see, that's all we know. Did you take any of those on?
I know. So when I was a teenager, my youth minister counseled me a lot. And he said, "Hey, Chris, this is a miraculous, crazy, all the adjectives you want to add in here is story. And so you may not be ready now, but someday it'd be great to share the story for others." And so I can remember I was sharing my testimony at a church. I was probably 15 or 16, and this, little old lady came up to me and said, "Hey, are you afraid that you're going to end up like your dad?" And so that I didn't expect a question like that, especially being that young. And so anyway, that always kind of stuck with me. And so as I'm having kids, and the kids are getting older, I mean, I don't understand how a parent could do that to their own child. There would be times I'd sit there and watch my kids sleeping and just wonder how the heck could somebody do that. And so I realized my dad wasn't in his right mind. But yeah, so I thought about that a lot. And I'm not perfect. My wife will tell you, I struggle a lot with maybe getting too angry, but I always think about that in the back of my mind. I don't ever want to end up like my dad, or just anybody to think that I'm like my dad. And so that's in my mind a lot. And it's also helps me, I think, to be a better father, better husband. Just the fact that I think about that a lot. I need to think about it more because, again, we all have our own issues. I still struggle with, insecurity and just anger issues sometimes. But so that has helped me think about that and to think about what my dad put me through, put my just thinking about that. And so I think about my kids, and I would never want them to have to witness something like that, or just witness domestic violence in general. And so, yeah, that's helped me a lot to think about what happened.
Tell me, how do you deal with the loss of your brother? Do you think about him? Did you think about him often? Do you think about him now? Do you have a scar on the back of your head?
Yes, I have 3 scars. I have a scar on the back behind my left ear where the bullet went in. And so, he didn't miss. The bullet went in here, and it came out behind my right ear. So I have 2 scars there, and then I have a scar up here from surgery. The bullet actually destroyed the x-ray is pretty crazy to look at, but the bullet actually destroyed my cerebellum, which is the back part down here. And so if you see my x-ray, there's no cerebellum there at all. But I saw a neurologist years later, and he said the miraculous thing about the brain is, since I was so young, the rest of the brain took over. So it's a fully functioning brain. It's just not it doesn't look normal on an x-ray. So,
Wow.
but yeah, 3 scars from.
Wow. And do you think of your brother often?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I do. I've kind of gotten to the point in life where we have 5 kids, and so life is crazy. And so one way I've found to kind of cope with, being suicidal and depressed most of my life is just to stay busy. And so yeah, there's times I just sit around and think about what would life be like if I was hanging out with my brother. We were best friends. We all we had was each other. But yeah, honestly, and maybe it's not super healthy, but sometimes the best thing to do is just stay so busy that I can't think about being depressed or think about, it breaks my heart now, especially having kids. It breaks my heart to think how suicidal I was as a teenager. I didn't want to deal with this anymore. But it's just something inside me, and now I know, being a Christian, that it's the Holy Spirit saying, "Hey, hold on," And so I'd cry myself to sleep at night sometimes, not wanting to, but I just held on, and eventually it got better.
Thank God. But those are normal. And thank you for being so transparent and vulnerable and sharing that you were suicidal and that you were depressed, because a lot of men don't share that, unfortunately. And I say unfortunately because other men need to know that there are men that are depressed. There are men that have trouble dealing. Whoever said men don't cry is an idiot. I don't like that person, whoever said that men should not cry. That's totally false. And unfortunately, a lot of men go by that rule or whatever. We're not supposed to cry, or raise their sons. Shouldn't be crying. You're a man, and that's not true. We are all God, created in the image of God. God wept. Jesus wept, and that's an emotion. And so I appreciate you sharing that, you were depressed and that you were suicidal. And did you tell your grandparents that you felt that way? What was your way of coping and healing? How did you get through all this?
And like I mentioned kind of earlier, my grandparents were scared as far as like what they just didn't know how to raise me and the situation. And then there was also that whole, you're not my parents, anytime there maybe was an argument when I was a teenager or something.
Sure.
So we didn't really talk about that kind of stuff. And so I just got really involved in sports as a kid. And that's how I kind of stayed busy. I saw the kids on my team as brothers, as family. The coach was kind of like a father figure on a lot of my teams. And so I just kept myself busy with sports as a kid to kind of deal with it until I got older. And I kind of was able to process things more, being a little more mature. But that's how I dealt with it when I was little.
And Faith, you had mentioned that your children had also been affected by the abuser, your abuser. How did you guys deal? How do you deal? You guys have discussions about how they felt? And I ask that because, I have family members that have been abused, but they didn't deal with, and there's just a lot of blame, a lot of just self-hatred, because they don't want to deal, and they push the whole family out. They don't want to talk to anybody. And so we can't love them and, love on them. They don't want to hear from anybody. They don't want to talk to anybody. They don't want anybody's phone numbers. They don't want anybody, anything. And they are adults. And I think, gosh, that really stinks, because we want y'all to feel loved. We want y'all to know love. But how do you and your girls talk about how they feel, or how did you guys deal?
Yeah, we did a lot, especially early on. But with kids, I don't know about Chris and his age, but my kids were 2, 4, and 7 when I left. The 7-year-old remembers a lot. The 4-year-old remembers how she felt sometimes, but not exactly like she'll tell you now.
Sure.
She's got that amnesia is called, literally, that your body does it to protect you. The 2-year-old doesn't remember. She doesn't remember. But we would talk a lot about worth and value. You know, the other thing that really helped us was we had so many people involved. We don't have a lot of family right here, but my family stayed involved with them. His family stayed very involved with them. And nobody ever let them feel like any of it was their fault. You know, I felt like it was my fault. I mean, I married him. I brought him in. I stayed too long, but you know, all the things that you tell yourself. And I got to a point, and it did not take me very long to realize my girls needed, I mean, they were so little, like Chris was saying, you just stay busy, but they're so little. They need you every day, you know, like right hands on, you know? And so,
Sure.
I did get my girls very involved in sports from a young age. They've played every sport ever that they would let girls play. And I wasn't allowed to growing up. My brothers got to play basketball and baseball and all the things, and the girls weren't allowed to play sports. So my ex-husband was I was a sports minor, and he was like an athletic director in charge of everything, you know? And so I was like, no, y'all are playing everything. I mean, they've played everything you could think of. Now they're power lifters and tennis players and soccer players. And, but I do think that gives them that outlet. It gives them the team. It gives them that family feel. It gives them a sense of purpose. It gives them a sense of teamwork. And I just think sports it doesn't have to be sports either. It could be music. It could be art. It could be whatever avenue. But I do think kids need to help them figure out who they are, who God made them to be, and throw themselves into it, something that they love. And it doesn't have to be sports. You know, it could be 4-H, it could be music, it could be anything. Another thing that really helped, I would say my oldest too, is about, I don't know, Chris, how long ago, it was maybe 8 or 10 years ago, we found, they found us really, an organization that we both sat on the board for, that advocated for domestic violence. And that was really the first time that I told my story. And it was about 10 years ago. And there was something so healing about that whole process, just the way that it was done. It was perfection. Getting to tell my story gave me so much. It almost like validated me, you know, because you always feel like mine wasn't that bad. Nobody died. Nobody lost a limb. I mean, I've heard every story ever. And I've been able, by God's grace, to help hundreds of women who are and men actually trying to leave, that need advice, that are different all over the country, really all over the world. And had so many, you know, speaking engagements and people that want to just so many opportunities to tell my story. And that part for me has been so healing. And my daughter was able to join me in that journey. She modeled for they had a teen outreach of that, and to try to prevent domestic violence. You know, it gave them tools for what should we be looking for, what are the red flags that we should be looking for when we're dating, you know, so we get into the mess, you know, or even things for them to know what's not normal if they're being raised in a situation that's not healthy. And so it just gave them more tools in their toolbox to kind of see it, to be able to talk about it. And the purpose of that foundation was to break this shame, stigma, and silence of domestic violence. Always tell everybody the biggest tool you have, the abuser wants your silence. That is their strongest tool, because if what they're doing is hidden, they can do it forever, because obviously you haven't done anything yet, you know. And so if you can find somebody to tell it. Doesn't even have to be somebody that you know. It can be somebody anonymous on the internet. You know, you can find all kinds of resources on
Exactly.
violence. You can talk to them anonymously. But if you can find somebody to tell, you will start taking back your power, just slowly, a little bit of time, your freedom.
Absolutely.
It's incredible looking back. Like and I tell people today, I told somebody last week, she told me her heartbreaking story. And I told her, I said, in 6 months, you're going to look back and you are not going to believe how far you have come. You have got to keep going. One day, give me one day. Just get through today, you know, with young kids, and they don't know how they're going to live. They don't know how they're going to feed their kids. They don't know how they're going to pay the bills. They don't know how they're going to go back to work because now they're injured because he abused her. And just one day at a time, make a plan every day, where, you know, move that ball a little bit down the field every day. And you're going to look back one day and you are not going to believe it. And I went to court with her a few months later. She goes, I can't believe you were right. I just never even believed I would get through that day. And it still sucks. I mean, that day sucked. That day sucked.
Yes.
But it was so much better than it was. And her future is bright and not easy. I tell people all the time, it's not easy. Don't buy that. It's not easy. It's hard, but it's worth it. It's hard to stay and it's hard to leave, but it's worth it to leave.
Most definitely, Faith. And I think that both you and Chris, along with the others that share their stories, I mean, there is, I don't want to say purpose behind the pain, but there's a reason why you guys are here to share your stories, to give other people hope, and to encourage them that, they're able to leave or they're able to survive.
Mm-hmm.
Especially
you can do it, right. Yeah. Like I'm living proof. You can do it.
Absolutely. Both of you. And Chris, what is something that helped you heal? I know that you said that you had a youth pastor and counseling that they helped guide you, but did you go to counseling, or was your youth pastor your counselor?
No, so I kind of jokingly, I grew up in counseling. Kind of, it was almost like my grandma would take me to a different counselor every year. They would talk to me, and then basically tell my grandma, "Hey, we don't know where to go really." And so I'd go to another counselor. But so I kind of went through the whole rigmarole, and then as I got older, my youth minister started investing in me. That's really what helped me along the way is realizing that in the world, there are actually people that care about you. Mm-hmm. Because I was kind of, I don't know if it was self-taught, but I was really kind of learned that, 90% of the people in this world, they don't care about you at all. But there's that, when you find that 10%, you hold on to them and you let them invest in you, invest in them as well. And so I, youth minister, my grandpa, some coaches, and a few other friends that just constantly kept investing in me, whether it was just hanging out with me or just that was a huge part of my growth. And once I realized that there's people in this world that actually care about me, and so that helped me to grow. I became a Christian as a teenager, and then started maturing and learning what it was like to have a heavenly Father. I mean, just the whole concept to me was foreign. Just the idea of a loving Father. Mm-hmm. And so as I learned more and more about that, my youth minister, Jason, others who kind of helped me understand what that meant, and just they invested in me. So that's why now when I speak to youth a lot, it's a lot about investing and just hope and perseverance. But the whole you have to let others invest as well, because there's times when I just wanted to shut everybody out. So you have to be open to the fact of when others want to help you out. So
absolutely. And I know how tough that is when you don't have an earthly father, or the earthly father that you had was
not ideal,
a monster, or not a good guy, rather. And then you are introduced to your heavenly Father, and it's like, they say that your first introduction to a father, obviously, or introduction to Heavenly Father, is kind of what you think of your Heavenly Father as someone similar to your earthly father. So, myself, whenever I was hiding from my dad, I was hiding from him. As I grew up, like I was in my 20s, I was hiding from God. Like, I don't want to talk. He doesn't want to hear from me. I don't want to talk to him. I'm not good enough. I'm not, all the things that you think when you're a kid. But thank God for people that invest in you, and thank God for the two of you for investing in others, because you're sharing your story and letting other people know that they are not alone. And let me ask you this, both of you. Chris, what kind of dad are you?
I feel that I'm a good dad. I have a lot of flaws, obviously. And so I would hopefully, if you set all 5 of my kids down, that they would say that I was a good dad and that I was loving. I spend time with them. Again, I have I say things I wish I wouldn't have said, or I sit down in bed at night and realize, man, I should have spent more time with Liam, or with, it's hard to spend enough time with your loved ones. And so I feel that I'm a good dad. And I think the fact that I think about it and worry about it a lot means that I'm a good dad. The fact that I care because, I don't know, but yeah, I feel that. And from what I went through, I honestly believe that's helped me to be a better father as well.
Gosh, 5 kiddos. That's awesome. I absolutely love that. Okay. And then one more question to you, Chris, then I'm going to ask the same 2 questions to Faith, but, and this might be a little challenging, but Chris, as an adult now, what would you tell 5-year-old Chris? What would you, the unknowing Chris, little Chris, 5 years old, what would you tell him now? What would you tell him? What would you say to him as he's struggling?
I would definitely, as a little kid, it's probably hard to maybe explain perseverance. But I would tell him, hold on, just continue going. It's going to eventually get better. It might not be tomorrow. Sometimes it might get worse, but it will get better. If I hadn't held on, I wouldn't have the beautiful family I have today, beautiful wife. I wouldn't have all that if I would have, not kept going. And the other thing is, you have to have a foundation in Christ, in your faith. I don't know where I would be without that. And so again, but as a 5-year-old, that would be hard to understand. And so I really would just encourage them to hang on. It will get better, and you will look back at this day and realize that you are glad that you held on, and you're glad you believed that it would get better. And so I guess that's kind of the message.
Yeah, for sure. And like you said, that God's hand was all over it. I mean, the fact that your grandparents got, custody of you. And I'm sure as you look back and you can think that, wow, God was there. Because a lot of people feel like, including myself as a young teenager, thinking, where were you, God? Where were you? But as I got older, I could see there, you were there. You were there. I know you were there. And Faith, what kind of mom are you?
I feel like, Chris said earlier, I think you do the best you can with what you have. And then when you know better, you do better. When I first left, I was so stressed, so frazzled, so worried about the court case, so worried about all this stuff. I would, and I was raised in chaos, and then I lived in chaos until I was 38. Everything was always toxic. Everything was always chaos. And so, I had to learn and grow into not being an angry person, forgiveness, moving forward, and I learned that I can't spend all this time being angry and bitter and still pour into my kids. And so, you only get one chance to be an adult too. And so, I do think I've grown into a great mom. I always have, like Chris said, you lay down at night and think, oh, could have done a little bit better today, but you just get up the next day and do the best you can. Mm-hmm. I think I was very involved, present, very supportive of letting them be who God made them to be, not who I expected them to be. Mm-hmm. I gave them a foundation of faith, which is the greatest thing I think you can give your children.
Absolutely.
The gift of prayer, just praying over your kids all the time. They know that one thing they know is their mom's praying for them. Mm-hmm. And they're my pride and joy. So I'm so thankful.
They both have beautiful families, and there are pictures that we have that we'll show, and that you guys will see of their families. Just so beautiful. And Faith, as an adult, what would you tell little Faith? I mean, gosh, Faith is little, and gosh, she's about to go through a pretty big storm. What would you tell Faith?
Kind of twofold also. My life verse has always been Hebrews 13:5, which is, God, He will never leave us or forsake us ever. And I would just remind her, He will always be there no matter what, even on the days when you feel like You're the only one. Nobody understands. You feel so alone. You are never alone. You are never alone. And to find connection with somebody, like Chris was saying too, so many of my words echo his, because we went through some of the same stuff, even though it was different.
Right.
It's still, I lost my dad when I was a teenager, and we were all teenagers. My mom had 5 teenagers. So we were 14, 13, 12, 11, and 10 when my dad passed away. And so my mom was a single mom from that day on, and had to take on the role of dad as far as providing and all that, and teaching everything, even though you're just one person. And so I really think that gave me valuable tools for when I was a single mom. But I would just tell her that to hang on, to just do one day at a time, and God will give me the strength, and that the end is going to be beautiful, even on the days when you can't see it, it's worth it.
Wow, that's beautiful. Both of you, I appreciate you both so much coming on and joining me again and sharing your stories. It's so powerful. And the fact that you guys are able to be so transparent and vulnerable, and like I said, giving hope and letting other people know that God is good. He's good. He's a good father, and he's with us always. And I appreciate you guys joining me and taking the time out of your evening. I thank you. Thank your families for letting me steal you guys for a little bit this evening. And I hope and pray that I continue to remain connected to you guys. And again, everyone that's watching, please share. There are people that need to hear Chris and Faith's story, and to let them know that they are not alone. So until next time, I appreciate you guys for listening and for coming on and joining me. We'll see you next time. Everybody have a good night.
Bye, y'all.
This is your Prospera era, where dreams align with grace, abundance flows like rivers. You've stepped into your place. Rise, reign, and remember, you were born to shine. Welcome to your moment, Prospera, it's time.